let's get into it. I've got some thoughts on the two guys that just won conference championships in the National Football League, Patrick Mahomes of the Chiefs, Jalen Hurts of the Eagles. And I want to take you back to their college years when I was covering them, and a couple of stories about those two guys. We've got news out of Alabama. Obviously, two new coordinators now going to be at Alabama. We've got, I'll throw out some names as well. Crazy year in 2023. I can't wait to chatter about that. Some coaching news at Tennessee and Ohio State, just to give you kind of a brief rundown of what's going to happen before, again, I don't want to tease this too much, but maybe my favorite thing that I'm ever going to talk about on the Joel Klatt Show ever. So let's get into it with these Super Bowl quarterbacks for this year. And they are heading to Glendale. Patrick Mahomes of the Chiefs, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. Great games. Obviously, that second game on Sunday night was tremendous between Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. What I wanted to do is whoever won, because I got to cover all four of these guys in college, and whoever won these games, I was going to take those two quarterbacks and just go down memory lane a little bit and take you into some of my observations and things that maybe you haven't heard before about stories from their college days. So let's start with Patrick Mahomes. I remember covering Patrick. We did an Oklahoma State game of theirs down in Lubbock at Texas Tech. And maybe a couple of others as well. I know one more on the road. I just remember marveling at his ability, right? So just evaluating him going into those games, I went back to some of my notes and watching him play the game, there was a recklessness yet a fluidity to what he did. And the combination, you really couldn't put your finger on it, right? You thought to yourself, is this going to translate to the next level? I'm not sure, especially out of this offense. At that point, remember, no quarterback who had come out of an air raid system had really succeeded in the National Football League. Famously, Tim Couch, of Kentucky kind of got that domino rolling in terms of the wrong direction, and no one had really gone into the league and succeeded coming from that air raid system. And I know that Mahomes' system in particular, late in his career at Texas Tech had changed a little bit, and it was more NFL oriented than it was, let's say, the pure air raid that they ran like with Leach at Texas Tech or with Leach at Washington State and Mississippi State. But there was those questions. And so I wanted to talk to him about that. And I just remember when I talked to him, the first thing we did was talk about baseball, because obviously his family's got a baseball background. He was a terrific baseball player, and he knew that I had played minor league baseball. So for about the first 5-10 minutes, we talked about baseball, which I thought was interesting. And what really immediately came to my mind was that this kid loved to compete. And it didn't matter if we were going to play, a pickup game of hoops right there, or a game of wiffle ball, whatever it was going to be, a game of dodgeball, that he was going to be one of the best players on the field, regardless of game, and he was going to compete. That's just the vibe that I got from him, and that's certainly the vibe that he's given during the course of his career. I enjoyed that conversation immensely. And then I want to tell you a quick story about Patrick and in particular, the draft that he was drafted. That draft was in Philadelphia, and again, if you remember, there was a lot of questions about, where Mahomes should get drafted. What are we going to do with this guy? He doesn't fit into the box. He runs all over the place. He throws wildly. And I would say that the general consensus was that it probably shouldn't be higher than middle of the first round, kind of that 14th, 15th, 16th pick. It was a real outlier to find somebody that said, no, this guy is bona fide top 10, absolutely, go ahead. There was a lot of us, and by the way, me being one of them, that were concerned about the offense going into the NFL because of what I was suggesting earlier, right? We just hadn't seen a lot of success from guys that had played in that system during the course of their college days. And I remember being in the hotel. I can't remember which hotel it was, but I was in a hotel, and I was there for Fox, obviously, and obviously ESPN covered the draft as well. And I remember we were in the same hotel that a lot of the ESPN guys were staying in. And I went down for breakfast that morning, the morning of the first round. And sure enough, over in the corner, I know it's say what you will now, but at the time, John Gruden was in the corner, and it was like he was kind of the preeminent guy in terms of broadcasting at that point. Monday Night Football, obviously like highly respected Super Bowl winning coach. And he's like, hey, Klatt. And I didn't know how he knew who I was, but I was like, whoa, okay. And so I remember he was like, come on over here. Let's share a meal. And so I go and I sit with John Gruden to have breakfast the morning of the first round. And he immediately just wanted to talk ball. And so he starts asking me about all the players that I had covered in college football that were in that draft. And we went through all the guys that were in that draft. And then we get to Patrick Mahomes. And he's like, what do you think about Mahomes, man? You know, and he's got his eyebrow up. And then that's all he said. And so I thought, okay, well, you know, he's a West Coast guy, buttoned up. I'm going to give him my. And so I was like, well, you know, no quarterback has really succeeded from that offense, and I just don't know. We see him run around. Is it too much? Will he be able to fit in the NFL? There's a lot of question marks, and he's just kind of nodding. And then he's like, you know, Andy's taking him with the 10th pick. And I was like, wait. Andy Reid? I was like, really? And he tells me that right there. He's like, yep, Andy's taking him tonight. You know why? And I was like, please tell me why. He says, because every one of us that touched Favre, that's who we see in Patrick Mahomes. And then the light bulb went off and I was like, well, of course. And from that moment forward, I started thinking to myself, this guy is going to work out. And obviously he went and sat for a year, but he has been that style of guy, you know, the same gunslinging mentality that allowed Favre to be so successful, win a Super Bowl, win MVPs. That's kind of what we see from Patrick Mahomes. And the first time that light bulb went off for me was when I had that breakfast with John Gruden the morning of the first round of his draft. Then we moved to Jalen Hurts. So here's an incredible story in Jalen Hurts, because this guy has played, he might and probably should win the MVP this year. And think about this. You're talking about a guy that in old college football rules would have never been allowed, because remember, the graduate transfer wasn't really a thing, you know, for a long time. And transfers in general weren't really a thing. And so you're talking about a guy that if he plays college football in any moment other than the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, he would have never been in the National Football League. He would have never had the opportunity, the autonomy to move. So he begins his career at Alabama, and I think, by the way, that's in and of itself is and could be a trivia question at one point, because Jalen Hurts was the signal that Nick Saban was changing his offensive philosophy in order to go a route where he could compete and win in a shootout when he got into one. Because remember, he was running into those Clemson teams, and he realized how difficult it was to win based on defense and ball control offense. He knew, and we've seen this play out in college football playoffs time and time again, that at some point you're going to get into a shootout, and you better have a guy at the quarterback position that can take you to win a 40-42 shootout, 45-42 shootout. And so he needed to spread out the offense. He needed to get more athletic at the quarterback position. And Jalen Hurts was that signal to everyone. And he came in and had a wildly successful career early at Alabama, was the SEC Player of the Year at one point, led them into a national title game, and then got brutally pulled out of the game. Brutally pulled in what would eventually end up being a win for Alabama that didn't really feel like a win if you're Jalen Hurts, if we're honest with ourselves. And now all of a sudden Tua is the hero because he played 2 quarters really well and threw, that go ball down the left side. And here's Hurts, who kind of led them to that point. And did he have some shortcomings at the time? Probably, but gets brutally pulled and then ends up staying the next year as the backup, has to rescue Alabama in the SEC championship game. And then he's kind of left at this point where he graduates, did everything right, didn't complain, did everything right. And what does he do? I think one of the most brilliant things that I've seen from an older quarterback in a long time, which was he went to a place that had then become the quarterback factory, which was Oklahoma. Baker Mayfield for 3 years ends up being the number 1 pick in the draft. Then Kyler Murray, we think he's playing baseball. Nope, number 1 pick in the draft. He goes to Oklahoma, and he had a great year, really, when you think about it, for Lincoln Riley and the Oklahoma Sooners. He had to transfer. The only reason Jalen Hurts is who he is now is because he had the ability to transfer. All right. That's why I think it's somewhat comical that it's like Alabama's claiming Jalen Hurts. Listen, I get it. And I'm sure that he has a big place in his heart for Alabama. But he had to leave. Like this whole notion, I see Ohio State doing it with Joe Burrow and Alabama doing it with Jalen Hurts. It's like, listen, those guys had to leave, right? You can argue that they had the most success in college uniforms away from those schools, certainly in Burrow's case, and you can argue in Jalen Hurts' case. And so, like, it's hard for me when I see those teams try to claim. It's like, listen, you've got enough players to go ahead and like, hey, those are our guys. You know, hey, Bama and Ohio State, you don't get to claim Burrow and Jalen Hurts. You've got enough guys to claim. Let's be honest. These guys are for OU and for LSU. Okay? So he leaves, and last story that I would just talk about when it comes to Jalen Hurts is my few interactions, because Oklahoma is tough in terms of like trying to talk with players. And my few interactions with Jalen once he was at Oklahoma were very businesslike. You could tell there was a lot of scar tissue from what happened. And so there was a sense of urgency and purpose to everything that he did. His interactions with us in the media, the way that he played, all of it was very purposeful. And I think it's because of what he went through in that time at Alabama.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.